In a quiet and remote village in China, a young and healthy son-in-law suddenly passed away after falling ill. Soon after, his family gathered around a large mountain to hold a lavish and grand funeral for the deceased. The villagers believed that the family was deeply mourning his loss. However, just a month later, the local police station received an anonymous tip, causing a stir in the once peaceful village. Could there be a shocking secret hidden behind the grand funeral? The incident took place in Jiashui Village, Yimen County, Yushu City, Yunnan Province, China. On the village road of Jiashui, on November 22, 2013, the entire village witnessed a grand funeral in the deep mountains. The man who passed away at that time was named Ma Ding, only 36 years old, and he was the son-in-law of the Ma family in the village. Ma Ding's sudden death left the villagers somewhat shocked. Although none of Ma Ding's relatives from his hometown dared to attend the funeral, the Ma family followed local customs and spent a large sum of money to hold an extravagant funeral for him. However, strange events began to unfold afterward. On the morning of December 23, 2013, the local Jiashui police station under the Yimen County Police received a peculiar tip-off. The caller, a middle-aged man with a local accent, claimed he suspected Ma Ding's death was not natural, but rather a murder. When the police inquired for more details, the caller refused to reveal his identity and only mentioned that if they wanted more information, they could speak to a villager named Yang Shuisheng. The caller abruptly hung up the phone. After receiving this call, the police had many questions. First, who was this mysterious informant? Ma Ding had been buried for over a month. Why did the informant wait so long to report this? Additionally, if Ma Ding had indeed been murdered, why didn't his own family report it? Was there an unusual connection between Ma Ding's death and the Ma family? At this point, the police had no clear leads, so they decided to conduct a covert investigation. Instead of directly questioning Ma Ding's family, they began an external investigation around the village, hoping to uncover useful clues. After a preliminary investigation, the police discovered that Ma Ding had not been born into the Ma family. His original name was Ding Songfu, and he was from Yunnan County in Chongqing Province. Over a decade ago, Ding Songfu, who was working as a construction worker at the time, moved to Yunnan in search of work. Through a friend's introduction, he became the son-in-law of the Ma family in Jiashui Village. Following local customs, Ding Songfu changed his last name to Ma, and from then on, the villagers referred to him as Ma Ding. After joining the Ma family, Ma Ding no longer worked in construction, but instead began a piglet trading business. Thanks to his quick thinking, youth, and energy, Ma Ding's business grew, expanding from Jiashui village to several nearby towns. During the police investigation, most villagers expressed a fondness for Ma Ding. Everyone had the impression that Ma Ding was always in good health, and there had never been any talk of him being ill. Although his sudden death shocked the villagers, no one seemed suspicious. Instead, they recalled Ma Ding's grand funeral. Even though he was a son-in-law with no blood ties in Yunnan, the Ma family still held an elaborate ceremony according to local customs to bid him farewell. This gesture left the villagers with the impression that the Ma family was deeply caring and honorable. During the investigation, local police found nothing unusual, as the anonymous tipster had claimed. As a result, they decided to privately interview Yang Shuisheng, who was mentioned in the phone call. Yang Shuisheng, 52 years old, was a close friend of Ma Ding in Jiashui village. According to Yang Shuisheng's recollection, on November 22, 2013, he attended the Ma family home to bid farewell to his close friend. However, during the funeral proceedings, Yang Shuisheng happened to glance at Ma Ding's body and noticed some blood coming from both of his ears. This abnormality caused Yang Shuisheng to feel uneasy. Furthermore, he walked around the bed where the body lay and discovered a blood stain on Ma Ding's temple. It appeared that there was some kind of injury in that area. The first detail Yang Shuisheng described didn't surprise the investigators. According to the villagers, Ma Ding's cause of death was said to be a stroke, where a sudden blockage in his brain's blood vessels led to his death. In cases of severe stroke, brain damage can occur, and bleeding from the ears is a possible symptom. However, the presence of an injury on the temple was indeed unusual. Although Yang Shuisheng insisted that he was not lying about what he had seen firsthand, the local police still couldn't find any direct evidence that Ma Ding had been harmed. To verify Yang Shuisheng's claims further, the investigators sought out several villagers who had assisted with the funeral arrangements. They first spoke with the person who had initially handled Ma Ding's body, Ma Ju, a cousin of Ma Ding's wife. After Ma Ding's death, Ma Ju was the first to arrive at the Ma family home to help with funeral arrangements. According to Ma Ju's testimony, the incident had occurred early that same morning. When he arrived at the Ma family home, Ma Ding's family was cleaning his body and shaving him. Ma Ju stated that at that time, he did not notice any injuries or blood on Ma Ding's body. That night, Ma Ju primarily helped organize the funeral preparations and did not closely inspect Ma Ding's body. The police found this testimony to be completely different from what Yang Shuisheng had previously stated. As a result, the investigators turned to another villager, Ma Rong, who was also a cousin of Ma Ding's wife. That evening, Ma Rong was mainly responsible for changing Ma Ding's clothes, which meant he would have had a detailed view of the condition of Ma Ding's body. However, when questioned by the police, Ma Rong immediately claimed, "I didn't notice any injuries on Ma Ding's body." So, was Yang Shuisheng providing false information, or were both of Ma Ding's family members lying? In this situation, the police had to reconsider Yang Shuisheng's statement, as well as his social relationship with the Ma family. However, after investigating, the police found no clear conflicts or disagreements between Yang Shuisheng and the Ma family, which made it unlikely that he had provided false information. Could it be that Ma Ding's relatives were lying together? If that was the case, they were likely trying to cover up some dark conspiracy. After the initial investigation, the police decided to directly question Ma Ding's immediate family members. Following his death, there were only 3 adults left in the family: Ma Ding's wife, Ma Shuizhen, her father, Ma Kaifu, and her mother, Zhu Guixian. When discussing her husband's death, Ma Shuizhen appeared deeply distraught. According to her statement, Ma Ding fell ill on November 20th, 2013. That evening, after selling piglets at the market, Ma Ding came home for dinner. During that time, nothing unusual happened to Ma Ding. After dinner, the 4 members of Ma Shuizhen's family sat together and watched TV for a while. Later, feeling tired, Ma Ding went to bed early. Ma Shuizhen stayed up a little longer watching TV before joining him in their bedroom. At around midnight, Ma Ding began complaining of a stomachache and then severe headaches. At that point, Ma Shuizhen asked her husband if he wanted to go to the hospital, but Ma Ding firmly refused. However, by around 1 a.m., Ma Ding suddenly woke up, his face showing signs of pain. Within half an hour, he suffered a stroke and became unresponsive. It was noted that Ma Shuizhen and Ma Ding's bedroom was on the ground floor of the house, while her parents lived on the second floor. When the police questioned Ma Kaifu, Ma Shuizhen's father, about the situation at the time, he explained that on the night of the incident, he and his wife were asleep in their bedroom on the second floor the entire time. During this period, they didn't hear any unusual noises. It wasn't until their daughter, Ma Shuizhen, screamed that they woke up. When they went downstairs to their daughter's bedroom, Ma Ding had already passed away after suffering a stroke. Both Ma Kaifu and his wife expressed deep sorrow over the sudden death of their son-in-law. However, there was something in the statements from Ma Shuizhen and her parents that made the police suspicious. Regarding the cause of Ma Ding's death, both Ma Shuizhen and her parents firmly claimed that it was due to a stroke. What raised suspicion for the police was this: Ma Shuizhen and her family lived in a remote mountainous area with limited medical knowledge. How were they so certain that Ma Ding had died from a stroke? When asked this question, Ma Shuizhen explained that on the night Ma Ding fell ill, she had called a local doctor to come to the house and check on him. According to her, after the doctor examined Ma Ding, he immediately said that Ma Ding had suffered a stroke and that his pulse was gone. To verify this explanation, the investigators questioned her parents. Surprisingly, The elderly couple stated that they were unaware if any doctor had come to the house that night. This response heightened the police's suspicions. From the layout of the house, it was clear that Ma Ding and his wife lived on the ground floor. Early in the morning, when Ma Ding suddenly fell ill and supposedly sought medical help, it seemed implausible that something so significant could happen without the two adults living upstairs being aware. This defied common logic. At this point, the police pressed Ma Shuijin further, asking her which doctor she had called to examine her husband. In response, Ma Shuijin evaded the question and gave vague answers. This behavior only intensified the suspicion that the woman was lying and that there was something very wrong with this household. If they were responsible for Ma Ding's death, what could have been their motive for committing such a crime? To clarify the motive behind Ma Shuijin and her parents' actions in this case, the investigators began to explore the relationship between Ma Ding and his in-laws. The police learned that in 2003, at the age of 20, Ma Shuijin married Ma Ding at the behest of her parents, and Ma Ding joined the family as their son-in-law. While this may have seemed like a hopeful marriage to outsiders, its development did not go as expected. At the time, Ma Ding worked as a construction worker and had some savings. However, when he married Ma Shuijin, there was no formal wedding, not even a banquet to celebrate with the villagers. This lack of a proper ceremony left Ma Ding's father-in-law, Ma Kaifu, feeling resentful. He had hoped that once Ma Ding joined the family, he would help with some of the household duties. However, Ma Ding, being young and not much of a farmer, didn't contribute to the work around the house, which disappointed his in-laws. In the second year of their marriage, Ma Shuijin gave birth to a lovely daughter. Yet the arrival of the baby girl did not bring happiness to the family. Ma Ding held traditional views favoring sons over daughters and began to suspect his wife, often looking at their newborn daughter with disdain. About a year later, Ma Ding began asking Ma Shuijin for a divorce, but she always refused. As a result, Ma Ding became increasingly unhappy and often caused trouble after drinking. Despite Ma Shuijin and Ma Kaifu's efforts to persuade him, Ma Ding frequently resorted to physical violence. This toxic situation lasted for over 2 years, until Ma Shuijin gave birth to a son, which somewhat eased Ma Ding's frustrations. However, the cracks in the Ma family persisted. On one hand, Ma Ding looked down on his wife because she was illiterate and could not read or write. On the other hand, after earning a considerable amount of money from his business, Ma Ding began to stray and have affairs. According to a friend, Ma Ding often spent nights away from home, engaging in a secretive nightlife that was difficult to completely hide. In addition to gambling and drinking, Ma Ding had illicit relationships with several women outside of his marriage. Regarding Ma Ding's lavish spending outside the home, Ma Shuijin and her family had long been aware of it. Based on the investigation and interviews, there was indeed an underlying motive between Ma Ding and Ma Shuijin, with clear conflicts and tensions within the family. From this, one could speculate about Ma Ding's mysterious death, leading to suspicions directed toward Ma Shuijin and her parents. However, after a thorough investigation of the case, the police lacked concrete evidence to prove that Ma Shuijin or her parents had killed Ma Ding. In fact, there was no direct evidence to even confirm whether Ma Ding had been murdered at all. At this point, the only remaining option was to conduct an autopsy, but due to the lack of sufficient evidence to prove it was a homicide, and the Ma family's refusal to allow the exhumation, the police were left without any further recourse. Faced with this difficult situation, the investigators devised another plan. They decided to set a trap for Ma Shuijin. On the morning of January 15, 2014, a group of police officers arrived at Ma Shuijin's home. They brought along some shovels and professional investigative tools. One officer put Ma Shuijin in a police car and asked her where Ma Ding's grave was located. Meanwhile, the other officers inside the vehicle began discussing the steps and methods for opening the coffin and conducting the autopsy. The aim was to create psychological pressure on Ma Shuijin. After a few minutes, the police noticed fear creeping across Ma Shuijin's face. They then pressed her further about her husband's death. In her state of panic, Ma Shuijin finally confessed the truth. She revealed that on the night of the incident, after losing a lot of money gambling with friends, Ma Ding returned home looking dejected. At that moment, Ma Shuizhen's father, Ma Kaifu, was drunk. This led to an argument between the two, which quickly escalated into a physical fight. In a drunken rage, Ma Kaifu went to the kitchen, grabbed an axe, and while Ma Ding was off guard, struck him with a powerful blow. This confession came as a shock to the police. They then brought Ma Kaifu in for questioning. However, he denied everything his daughter had said. Ma Kaifu told the police, "On the night of the incident, I wasn't drinking. In fact, my wife and I had gone to bed early, and it wasn't until my daughter screamed that I knew something had happened to Ma Ding." Faced with two completely different statements from Ma Kaifu and his daughter, the investigators had no choice but to bring both in for a direct confrontation. After some debate, Ma Shuizhen's plot to frame her father was fully exposed. According to her confession, she had used an axe to kill Ma Ding while he was sleeping. She also added that the reason for her actions was that both she and her parents had suffered long-term abuse and disrespect from Ma Ding. To end this suffering, she felt she had no choice but to take such an extreme action. Although Ma Shuizhen confessed to the entire crime, in a criminal case like this, the police still needed to gather supporting evidence to ensure the integrity of the investigation and corroborate her confession with physical proof. As a result, the authorities decided to exhume Ma Ding's body for an autopsy, which took place on January 20th, 2014, 60 days after his burial. The results of the autopsy and the forensic examination presented new issues. Ma Ding's body showed no clear injuries except for a severely fractured skull. Based on this, forensic experts speculated that Ma Ding had likely been struck with a hard object, causing internal brain damage and leading to his death. These findings were consistent with Ma Shuizhen's account of killing Ma Ding with an axe. To ensure nothing was overlooked, the forensic experts conducted a detailed comparison of Ma Ding's fatal injuries. While the critical evidence pointed to Ma Shuizhen, the investigators uncovered a new point of suspicion. According to the forensic experts' analysis, the head injury was extremely severe, suggesting it was caused by a powerful external force. However, Ma Shuizhen, a petite rural woman, would not logically have the physical strength to inflict such a grave wound. Could someone else have killed Ma Ding? The police began to reevaluate everyone who had been in the house the night of the incident. According to Ma Shuizhen's previous statement, on the night of the crime, she and Ma Ding were sleeping in the master bedroom on the ground floor, while their two children were sleeping in a small room farther away. Ma Shuizhen's parents, meanwhile, had been sleeping in their bedroom on the second floor all night. Of everyone present, only Ma Kaifu, Ma Shuizhen's father, was physically strong enough to have inflicted such a severe injury. However, after multiple interrogations, Ma Kaifu continued to insist that he knew nothing about the death of his son-in-law, Ma Ding. Since no related evidence could be found, the investigators had to shift their focus to other members of the Ma family. The police discovered that after Ma Shuizhen killed Ma Ding, the Ma family held a secret family meeting. According to the investigation, the primary purpose of this meeting was to cover up Ma Shuizhen's crime. Late on the night of the incident, Ma Kaifu and his wife contacted some of Ma Shuizhen's cousins and agreed on a false statement. They told outsiders that Ma Ding had died suddenly of a stroke. Additionally, to avoid suspicion and any backlash from the villagers, the Ma family members collectively decided to hold the grandest funeral for Ma Ding. Although the Ma family's actions were intended to protect their family member, their attempt to conceal the crime was still subject to prosecution under the law. From this family meeting, the police confirmed further that Ma Shuizhen was indeed involved in Ma Ding's murder. But the question remained, what method did she use to cause such a severe injury? Throughout the investigation, Ma Shuizhen displayed a lot of contradictions, hiding secrets she couldn't reveal. These questions prompted the investigators to revisit the crime scene. Although no additional incriminating evidence was found in Ma Shuizhen's bedroom, the police did discover some footprints. After Ma Ding's death, Ma Shuizhen not only discarded the bedding they had used, but also replaced the mattress and sheets. Under Ma Shuizhen's new pillow, the police unexpectedly found a photograph. The man in the picture was quite handsome and clearly wasn't Ma Ding. Based on statements from several villagers, Ma Shuijin was considered an attractive woman in both Jiashui village and Tongren town. After Ma Ding's death, several single men from nearby villages had called Ma Shuijin, expressing interest in starting a new family with her. This led the police to speculate. Could the handsome man in the photo be Ma Shuijin's new boyfriend? The police showed the picture to Ma Shuijin's parents for identification, but both Ma Kaifu and his wife firmly claimed that they did not know the man in the photo. Thus, the police began analyzing the situation. Less than 2 months after Ma Ding was buried, Ma Shuijin had hidden a photo of another man under her pillow. This was clearly a suspicious act. Logically, this mysterious man and Ma Shuijin must have had a close relationship. So, who was this mysterious man that Ma Shuijin was holding on to in her thoughts? Since the case was highly significant in the area, the police immediately printed more copies of the photo and began investigating around Jiashui village. In less than half a day, a villager recognized the man in the photo. His name was Chi Quan, 37 years old, from Meiduo village located in Tongren town, Yimen County. Meiduo village was separated from Jiashui village by only one mountain. According to the villager, although Chi Quan was quite handsome, he was almost 40 years old and still single. To make a living in recent years, he had been working at a steel plant in Xinping County, Yushu City. He rarely returned home, but recently, around the time of Ma Ding's murder, Chi Quan had taken leave to care for his elderly mother, who was seriously ill. Given these unusual timing details, investigators believed there was significant suspicion surrounding Chi Quan. Therefore, on January 21, 2014, police from Yimen County went to the steel plant in Xinping to locate Chi Quan. Faced with police interrogation, Chi Quan quickly confessed to his crime. After learning that Chi Quan had been arrested, Ma Shuijin dropped her guard. In the interrogation room, a series of questions awaited answers. What was the relationship between Chi Quan and Ma Shuijin? And what exactly happened between them and Ma Ding on the night of the murder? Rewinding time to more than a year earlier in 2013, in Tongren town, Xinping County, due to limited economic conditions, many women chose to work in the outskirts. This led to many single men being unable to find suitable marriage partners, and Chi Quan, struggling financially, was one of them. But while searching for a partner, a chance encounter brought Chi Quan and Ma Shuijin together. From their first meeting, Ma Shuijin and Chi Quan felt an attraction toward each other. Not long after, Ma Shuijin confided in Chi Quan about the conflicts between her and her husband, Ma Ding. Although Chi Quan knew that Ma Shuijin was married, the sudden spark of love gave him the courage to protect her. Based on Ma Shuijin's testimony, in the beginning, she and Chi Quan communicated secretly by phone. During these conversations, Ma Shuijin told Chi Quan that she was experiencing real love for the first time. After that, their hearts quickly grew closer, and they wasted no time in deepening their connection. From then on, Ma Shuijin and Chi Quan began meeting more frequently. Typically, Ma Shuijin's husband, Ma Ding, had to go to the market to sell piglets, and she used this opportunity to lie to her family, claiming that she was going to the market to shop. In reality, she had already arranged secret rendezvous with Chi Quan in a discreet location. Later, in her determination to live openly with Chi Quan, Ma Shuijin bravely proposed divorce to Ma Ding. However, Ma Ding refused. In the 6 months leading up to the incident, although Ma Shuijin and Ma Ding still lived under the same roof, their marriage had essentially ceased to exist. Ma Ding openly dated other women without hiding it, while Ma Shuijin, in secret, gradually developed an unbreakable relationship with Chi Quan. The frequent arguments over the divorce escalated tensions between Ma Shuijin and Ma Ding. Although Ma Shuijin wanted a divorce, she had lingering concerns. If she divorced, she might have to part ways with her 2 children. As their conflicts escalated, Ma Shuijin and Chi Quan finally made a decision. They devised a dark plan to resolve the issue. On November 19, 2013, Chi Quan traveled to Yimen County to secretly meet Ma Shuijin. They planned the next steps at a small hotel, believing they had found the perfect way to eliminate Ma Ding so they could start a new life together without any obstacles. Around 8 p.m. the following evening, Ma Shuijin called Chiquan and instructed him to ride his motorcycle to her house and wait out front. Upon arriving at the Ma household, Ma Shuijin led Chiquan to hide in the bushes near the house. According to Chiquan, he waited until after 11 p.m. when Ma Ding was sound asleep. Ma Shuijin, armed with an axe, went into the bedroom alone, while her lover, Chiquan, stood by the bedroom door, encouraging her. However, standing before her husband of more than 10 years, Ma Shuijin couldn't bring herself to follow through. As the minutes passed, Chiquan, waiting by the door, grew increasingly anxious. About 5 minutes later, Ma Shuijin left the bedroom and handed the axe to Chiquan, asking him to do it instead. At this moment, Chiquan felt a tinge of fear, but he remembered the happy days they'd shared over the past 6 months and worried about the trouble that would arise if Ma Ding woke up. So in the end, he took matters into his own hands and attacked Ma Ding. After committing the crime, Chiquan went to the intersection, then secretly rode his motorcycle out of Jiashui village. He and Ma Shuijin had agreed that after Ma Ding's funeral passed peacefully, they would start discussing their future marriage. However, things didn't go as they had planned. The mysterious death of Ma Ding aroused suspicion among the villagers. After his arrest, Chiquan expressed regret for his actions. Initially, he thought meeting Ma Shuijin would be the beginning of a beautiful life, but now he was facing a murder charge. Ultimately, the truth of the matter was revealed. On May 30th, 2014, Ma Ding's case went to trial in the Yushu City Intermediate People's Court. The mastermind of the crime and the one who directly committed the murder, Chiquan, was found guilty of intentional homicide and sentenced to death. Ma Shuijin, as an accomplice who concealed her lover's actions, was also held accountable. The court sentenced her to 20 years in prison. Thus, this mysterious case was solved efficiently and accurately. It stands as a tragic reminder and a valuable lesson about the consequences of marital discord. The case we're going to explore took place in downtown Changzhou, located in the southern region of Jiangsu Province, on September 11, 2014, at 9:56 a.m. A fire suddenly broke out in an apartment building in the Xinbei district of Changzhou. About 10 minutes later, the local fire department quickly arrived at the scene. At the time of the incident, the apartment was filled with thick smoke and large flames. As the brave firefighters prepared to enter the building to extinguish the fire, an unexpected situation occurred. A middle-aged man rushed out of the apartment holding a woman covered in blood. The woman's lower clothing had been completely burned. One of the firefighters quickly took off his protective gear to cover the injured woman. They then placed the victim in an ambulance. During emergency first aid, the firefighters discovered that the woman had multiple cuts on her body, suggesting the possibility of a criminal act. They immediately contacted the local police department. Soon after, officers from the Changzhou City Police Headquarters arrived at the scene. The apartment was located on the 4th floor of a residential building. The fire had been almost entirely extinguished. The layout of the apartment was a standard 2-bedroom, 1-living-room configuration. Upon entering the front door, there was the living room, with the 2 bedrooms located on the north and south sides. After an initial investigation, the police discovered that there were 2 points of origin for the fire. One in the south bedroom, where the homeowner's computer monitor had melted from the heat. The second point of origin was in the bathroom on the west side of the apartment. At the entrance to the bathroom, police found several drops of blood. Inside the bathroom, despite the firefighters having sprayed water over the entire floor, large bloodstains were still visible. Based on the distribution of the blood, it was clear that the victim had been brutally attacked in this bathroom. Additionally, police found a pair of scissors and the cap of a bottle of liquor in the bathroom. On the floor, they also found some fabric that had been burned to ash. From these clues, the police suspected that the arsonist had attacked the victim before setting the apartment on fire to cover up the crime. So what could have driven the perpetrator to commit such a brutal act? There must have been a deep grudge or unresolved conflict behind this crime. The Changzhou City Police had hoped that the victim would recover and help solve the mystery. Unfortunately, she was too severely injured and passed away on the way to the hospital. After the initial investigation, the police identified the victim as Li Sha, 32 years old, from Huyan Town, Jiangsu Province. At the time of the crime, she had been home alone. Li Sha's apartment was located in a newly built residential complex near a small river, less than 5 years old. According to the complex's management, most of the residents were elderly, and security in the area had always been very good, with no serious crimes ever reported there. However, after the incident, the mood among the residents became more anxious. Investigators continued to thoroughly examine the scene. According to the forensics report, Li Sha's time of death was between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. on the day of the crime. The victim had 11 distinct stab wounds to her neck and chest, including a deep cut about 3.3 inches long on her neck. Since the lower half of her body had been burned, the forensic team speculated that Li Sha may have been unconscious when the fire was set. Additionally, the forensic team found that her injuries from her thighs to her abdomen were severe and that traces of alcohol were present in her clothing. This led them to conclude that the attacker had poured alcohol on her body before setting it on fire to destroy the evidence. It was shocking that, in broad daylight, an ordinary housewife was attacked in her own home. The Changzhou City Police suspected that the motive behind this brutal act likely involved one of three things: hatred, money, or sex. However, while investigating the crime scene, the detectives noticed some unexplained details. First, there were no signs of forced entry at the windows or doors. Additionally, a key was found inserted in the door's lock. Based on this, police speculated that the perpetrator may have followed Li Sha to her residence, and when she opened the door, the attacker took control of her and committed the crime. However, further investigation made this initial police assumption seem unreasonable. At the scene, forensic personnel did not find any suspicious fingerprints or footprints, and no valuable items were missing from the victim's home. The only things that had disappeared were 2 bottles of liquor and a cell phone. Police speculated that the perpetrator might have used the liquor bottles to start the fire, but what raised suspicion was the fact that the 2 empty liquor bottles were missing. Why would the killer take 2 worthless empty bottles? Even more puzzling was that after the crime, the victim's cell phone sent a text message to her husband. The message read, "Honey, where's the money? I have a stomachache and need to go to the hospital." Clearly, this was a message sent by the killer, but from the crime scene investigation, it appeared that the culprit had no intention of stealing anything. So, after committing the crime, why would the perpetrator ask such a strange question about the location of the money? This left the Changzhou police baffled, as they couldn't figure out the motive behind the crime. As a result, they decided to reenact the entire sequence of events to find the culprit. The first person to arrive at the scene after the fire was the victim's husband, Wang Qingli, a 35-year-old Changzhou local. After learning about the fire, he was the one who pulled his wife from the blaze. According to Wang Qingli's statement, on the day of the incident, he was at work as usual. Suddenly, he received a text message from his wife on his cell phone. However, the message struck Wang Qingli as very strange because they had agreed that Li Sha would manage the family's finances and that they didn't keep cash at home. As a result, Wang Qingli immediately called Li Sha, but no one answered. 30 seconds later, he called again, only to discover that his wife's phone had been turned off. Worried, he decided to rush home. About 40 minutes later, Wang Qingli and his co-worker arrived at the apartment building. They noticed black smoke billowing from Unit 401. His co-worker called the fire department, while Wang Qingli rushed into the apartment to find his wife. He found Li Sha severely injured, lying unconscious in a pool of blood in the bathroom. The lower part of her body was badly burned. Wang Qingli quickly pulled his wife out of the apartment. Although she was successfully rescued from the fire due to the extent of her injuries, she ultimately did not survive. Wang Qingli stated that the key in the apartment door was the one he had left behind. At that time, in his rush to save his wife from danger, He did not remove the key. The police collected Wang Qingli's contact information and reviewed footage from the security cameras in the lobby of the apartment building on the day of the incident. Ultimately, all the information Wang Qingli provided was confirmed to be accurate. The police temporarily ruled him out as a suspect. From Wang Qingli's message records, investigators identified a critical moment: the time when he received the message from Li Sha's phone. This happened at 9:07 a.m. on the day of the incident. This means that before this time, the perpetrator may have still been at the crime scene. It's possible that the killer sent the message before attacking and killing the victim and then proceeded to set the fire. If the key in the apartment door didn't belong to the victim, then there are two possible ways the killer could have gained access to the apartment. In the first scenario, the killer followed Li Sha to her door and quickly prevented the door from closing before she could lock it. In the second scenario, the killer and Li Sha knew each other, and she opened the door willingly without any suspicion. Based on the investigation at the crime scene, Changzhou police have not yet been able to determine how the perpetrator gained access. Therefore, they decided to review surveillance footage from the residential complex and conduct a more detailed investigation. Unfortunately, the apartment complex does not have any surveillance cameras around the building, and only 3 entrance points in the complex are equipped with cameras. Based on the specific timeline of the case, Changzhou police collected all the surveillance footage from every entrance and exit before and after the time of the crime. However, since it was during work hours, there were many people moving in and out on the video, so the police could only review it slowly and carefully. From the footage, it was clear that at 6:40 a.m. on the morning of the crime, the victim, Li Sha, was seen at the entrance of the apartment complex with her son. She was wearing a yellow sleeveless shirt and blue jeans, seemingly taking her son to school. There were no signs of anything unusual. At 8:09 a.m., Li Sha appeared a second time. In the footage, she returned to the apartment complex carrying a small white bag. The police speculated that this could have been her breakfast or groceries for cooking. Everything still appeared normal. After Li Sha returned to the complex, the police found no signs of anyone following her or behaving suspiciously in the surveillance footage. There were no useful clues from the video. However, the police formed a new hypothesis. Could the perpetrator have been a resident of the apartment complex? The investigation suddenly became uncertain. In this situation, Changzhou police decided to return to the crime scene for a more detailed investigation. It had been a day since the crime, but upon returning to the scene, the officers found a critical clue. In the kitchen of the apartment where the crime took place, they discovered a small white bag containing half-eaten breakfast. After carefully comparing it with the surveillance footage, the police confirmed that the white bag was indeed the one Li Sha had brought home on the day of the crime. Based on this, the police speculated that the killer likely did not follow Li Sha into the apartment. If that had been the case, Li Sha would have been confronted by the killer at the door and wouldn't have had time to eat breakfast. Therefore, there are only 2 possibilities for how the perpetrator entered the apartment. The first possibility is that Li Sha and the killer entered the apartment together, with Li Sha naturally placing the breakfast bag in the kitchen and the killer attacking her when she was off guard. The second possibility is that Li Sha returned home alone, placed the breakfast bag in the kitchen, and the killer later entered either through her unlocked door or by gaining access in some other way before committing the crime. In either case, it's certain that the killer and Li Sha knew each other, or in other words, the killer had earned Li Sha's trust. Based on the timeline of the crime, the police uncovered another clue. From the video footage, it was clear that Li Sha returned to the apartment complex at 8:09 a.m. It takes about 6 minutes to walk from the entrance of the complex to her apartment. This means that Li Sha arrived home around 8:15 a.m. The time her husband, Wang Qingli, received the message from the killer was 9:07 a.m. that same morning. From this, we can infer that the crime occurred between 8:15 and 9:07 a.m. During this short window, the killer entered the apartment, murdered Li Sha, and set the fire to destroy evidence before fleeing the scene. To carry out everything so precisely, the killer must have been very familiar with Li Sha's daily routine. After considering the possibility that the killer was someone Li Sha knew, Changzhou police immediately began investigating her social relationships. Investigators discovered that Li Sha was originally from a town in the northern part of Jiangsu province. Over 10 years ago, she moved to Changzhou for work, where she later met her husband, Wang Qingli. After getting married and having a child, due to health reasons, Li Sha quit her job and became a full-time homemaker. Her main daily task was taking her child to and from school. In Changzhou, Li Sha didn't have many relatives or friends, and aside from calling her husband, Wang Qingli, she had little contact with the outside world. Notably, in the last 2 years since she left her job, Li Sha rarely participated in social activities and had almost no interaction with her former co-workers. With such a simple social circle, Changzhou police couldn't identify any suspects capable of committing the crime. At the same time, detectives also investigated Li Sha's husband, Wang Qingli. The results showed that Wang Qingli was a quiet and reserved person. His social connections were limited to a few colleagues at work, but the relationships between them were good, with no conflicts or financial disputes. After a series of investigations, Changzhou police developed a new lead in the case. They believed the killer could be a resident of the apartment complex. There were 3 key points supporting this theory. The first was that, since Li Sha's family did not have many social connections, only people living in the neighborhood would know about her daily routine. The second point was that the killer may have easily gained access to Li Sha's apartment and quickly left the scene afterward, suggesting that the killer was very familiar with the apartment complex. The third point was that, based on the investigation at the crime scene, the killer might have gotten blood on themselves during the attack. However, after the crime, the police found no suspicious individuals in the surveillance footage at the entrance of the residential complex. This could only be explained by the fact that the killer might have returned to their own apartment immediately after committing the crime. As a result, Changzhou police shifted their focus to investigating the building where Li Sha's family lived. The police began questioning residents one by one, and it wasn't surprising when they came across a rather suspicious middle-aged man who lived across from Li Sha. There were 2 apartments directly across from the victim's home. One was occupied by a family of 4, and the other by a single man in his 30s. According to a neighbor, the man's name was Wang Chaowei, and although he was 35, he was still unmarried. He had been acting strangely. The night of the crime, Wang Chaowei didn't return home to sleep. With information provided by a neighbor's phone, the police quickly tracked down Wang Chaowei. At the time, he was working as a quality inspector at a coal company. The police asked Wang Chaowei where he had been on the morning of September 11th, and he responded, "On the day of the crime, I was at work. Then I got a call from my neighbor saying that there was a fire next door, and they advised me to come home and secure my belongings. So I rushed back to the apartment complex by taxi. That's when I found out that my neighbor Li Sha had been murdered." The police continued questioning Wang Chaowei, asking, "Did you know the victim?" Wang Chaowei thought for a moment and replied, "I know them. The couple had introduced me to a girlfriend before." The investigators didn't find anything unusual in Wang Chaowei's statement, but one detail about his appearance caught their attention. At the time, Wang Chaowei was wearing a long-sleeved shirt, with his left sleeve rolled up while his right sleeve was left down. This unusual behavior seemed like he was trying to hide something. A detective then pretended to accidentally brush against Wang Chaowei's right arm, and Wang Chaowei cried out in pain. The police then asked Wang Chaowei to roll up his right sleeve, revealing a fresh wound about 1 to 1.5 inches on his right arm. The police asked Wang Chaowei about the wound. Without hesitation, he replied, "I accidentally cut myself while working a few days ago." Even though Wang Chaowei could answer every question fluently, the strange wound on his arm raised significant suspicion among the police. Therefore, they decided to continue searching for witnesses to verify whether Wang Chaowei's statements were accurate. However, Changzhou police were caught off guard when, the very next day, Wang Chaowei disappeared. According to neighbors, Wang Chaowei packed some luggage and left the rental house that morning. As for his destination, the neighbors stated they weren't sure. Based on typical reasoning, Changzhou police suspected that Wang Chaowei might have fled to avoid responsibility. They quickly went to the coal company where Wang Chaowei worked, hoping to find information from his co-workers about where he might have gone. According to his colleagues, on the morning of September 11th, Wang Chaowei was indeed working at the company. Then, around 10 a.m., he received a phone call and left the company in a hurry. Based on this timeline, Wang Chaowei didn't have much time to commit the crime. But what puzzled the Changzhou police was why he disappeared so suddenly after being asked to provide a statement. Could Wang Chaowei be involved in this case after all? 4 days have passed since the incident occurred. Currently, the only suspect is missing. The pressure to solve the case is mounting for the Changzhou police. To avoid missing any clues, the Changzhou police decided to conduct a comprehensive investigation in the apartment complex where the incident took place. During the investigation, the officers asked the residents the following 3 questions. Where were you between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. on September 11th? What were you doing? Is there anyone who can confirm your location? After a full day of investigation, the police gathered responses from each resident. However, after thorough analysis, they did not identify any suspects based on those answers. The only point of suspicion came from one man among them, named Li Kun. He is an ordinary worker in Changzhou and also a resident of the area. His home is located in a building behind Li Sha's house, and he lives with his family of 4. When the police entered his home for questioning, Li Kun was sleeping in his bedroom. While his answers to the investigators' questions were not particularly suspicious, one statement caught the attention of the police. Li Kun said, he left the neighborhood at 9:37 a.m. to go to the market outside the area. Typically, when people describe their actions, they do not give such precise times, as in everyday life, one does not usually remember exact moments. However, Li Kun provided a very specific time of 9:37 a.m. This, of course, raised suspicions among the police. However, after continuing the investigation and further interviews, the police discovered that Li Kun did not have a complex social life and had no prior criminal record. Moreover, he didn't even know Li Sha. Although both families lived in the same neighborhood, they had virtually no interaction in their daily lives. Based on these circumstances, the investigators speculated that the likelihood of Li Kun being the perpetrator was low. Nonetheless, the Changzhou police decided to review the surveillance footage from the day of the incident to see if the time Li Kun mentioned was accurate. At this time, Wang Chaowei, who had his phone turned off all day, suddenly powered it back on. Using cell phone tracking, Changzhou police quickly located Chaowei, who had been missing. His testimony once again puzzled the investigators. According to Wang Chaowei, the reason he turned off his phone was not to evade police investigation, but because after moving houses, he forgot to charge his phone at his old rental place. The phone eventually died, and while Wang Chaowei was cleaning, he didn't pay attention to it. When the police asked Wang Chaowei why he abruptly left the neighborhood, he responded, "My neighbors suspected me of being the one who killed Li Sha. Faced with this baseless accusation, I couldn't make sense of it, so I decided to leave the neighborhood to escape the gossip." The Changzhou police could not verify the truth of Wang Chaowei's personal testimony, which led to him being dismissed as a suspect. In the eyes of the Changzhou police, they always felt that there were still some important clues in the case that had yet to be uncovered. As a result, the investigation team decided to go through all the items at the crime scene again, hoping to gather useful leads. At the same time, they reviewed the neighborhood's surveillance footage once more. This time, the police focused closely on the movements of Li Kun, a resident of the neighborhood. The footage confirmed that Li Kun left the neighborhood at 9:37 a.m. on the day of the incident. However, a small detail in the footage caught the attention of the investigators. They noticed that when Li Kun left the neighborhood, he was holding a white plastic bag. While the police couldn't clearly see what was in the bag, they remembered one thing. Earlier, 2 white bottles of liquor had mysteriously gone missing from the victim Li Sha's house. The police had previously suspected that the killer might have taken those bottles. Now, in the footage, the shape of the items in the plastic bag Li Kun was holding closely resembled the shape of the 2 white liquor bottles. It's undeniable that this small detail further increased the possibility that Li Kun was the suspect. However, there were still two lingering mysteries surrounding Li Kun that the Changzhou police couldn't understand. First, if Li Kun really was the killer, why weren't there any traces of blood on him when he left the neighborhood? Could it be that he went home to change clothes after committing the crime? However, Li Kun's house and the victim's house were not in the same building. If he had to go back home, he would have had to walk through the neighborhood, yet no one saw Li Kun covered in blood. The second mystery is that Li Kun and Li Sha were not acquainted, and their families had no daily interactions or conflicts. In fact, aside from the neighborhood surveillance footage, the Changzhou police still did not have enough evidence to charge Li Kun. Even if he were the killer, the judicial system could not convict him without solid proof. At this moment, when the Changzhou police were at a loss, some good news arrived from the crime scene investigators. Finally, hidden deep inside a closet in the victim's bedroom, they found a wallet. On the wallet, the investigators discovered a very small and almost undetectable blood stain. The forensic team took a sample of the blood and quickly sent it for DNA analysis. At the same time, the Changzhou police summoned two suspects, Wang Chaowei and Li Kun. At the police station, both men had their blood samples taken for DNA testing. The next morning, the forensic team returned the results, revealing that the blood on the wallet belonged to Li Kun. However, by this time, Li Kun had disappeared without a trace. The Changzhou police soon found that Li Kun had not returned home after the blood sample collection. Instead, he had fled to a hotel near the apartment complex. On September 18, 2014, exactly 7 days after the crime occurred, the Changzhou police handcuffed Li Kun while he was sleeping in the hotel. He was immediately brought in for interrogation. But during the interrogation, Li Kun's confession shocked every officer present. Li Kun confessed that he was indeed the one who killed Li Sha. According to his statement, he and Li Sha had been in a secret romantic relationship that no one knew about. However, Li Kun went on to say that he had grown tired of the immoral affair, and on the day of the murder he went to Li Sha's house to break up with her. But Li Sha, driven by greed, demanded 100,000 RMB, around 14,000 USD, as a breakup fee. Upon hearing this, Li Kun immediately flew into a rage. In his anger, he grabbed a kitchen knife and ended Li Sha's life. Afterward, he set fire to the house to destroy the evidence. Although Li Kun's confession seemed quite reasonable, one detail caught the police's attention. Based on previous investigations, the police found no communication between Li Sha and Li Kun. Even if they had kept their affair secret very well, there were no calls or messages between them on either of their phones. Furthermore, when Li Kun was arrested, the police still remembered his initial reaction. He claimed not to know the victim. Although, after his arrest, Li Kun did not deny committing the crime, his motive remained a major question. Was there a deeper, unspeakable secret between them? At this moment, one investigator recalled something very suspicious. On the night after Li Kun was called in for his blood sample, he didn't attempt to flee. Instead, he went to a nearby internet cafe and sat down at a computer to browse the web. This unusual behavior didn't seem consistent with the mindset of a criminal. As a result, the Changzhou police went to the internet cafe and retrieved Li Kun's browsing history from that night. The results from the computer search left the police puzzled once again. That night, Li Kun had searched for very strange questions online. Based on his search history, it was possible to speculate that Li Kun might have been trying to pretend to be the victim's lover in order to take the blame. He had researched online whether a judge might give a lighter sentence if someone attacked another person after being emotionally hurt by them. Given these absurd search queries, Li Kun's confession quickly fell apart under the scrutiny of the Changzhou police. Confronted with this evidence, Li Kun finally confessed the full truth about the case. As far back as May 2013, Li Kun had met a middle-aged man who introduced himself as Xiong from Guangdong. This man appeared to be wealthy and generous. He often took Li Kun out to drink and sing karaoke, followed by massages of a more intimate nature. Being an ordinary worker, Li Kun was quickly tempted. He felt like he had finally met a rare benefactor. A month later, Mr. Xiang took Li Kun to an underground casino. Initially, Xiang kept winning large sums of money, and Li Kun was amazed by what he saw. But soon after, Xiang suddenly started losing repeatedly, and all the money he had won was gone. At this point, Li Kun also became very anxious. So, Mr. Xiang borrowed 20,000 RMB from the casino's credit company, and Li Kun did not hesitate to act as the guarantor at that moment. He thought that Mr. Xiang would be able to win back all the lost money. As you can probably guess, the result was disastrous. Both Mr. Xiang and Li Kun lost all the money, and the next day, Mr. Xiang suddenly disappeared. As the guarantor, Li Kun stole his wife's bank card and withdrew 10,000 RMB to pay off part of the debt. He also used his entire monthly salary to continue paying it off. But Li Kun never imagined that, even after draining all his savings and salary, it still wasn't enough to cover the enormous interest. By the time the crime occurred, 2 months later, the massive debt Li Kun owed had ballooned to 160,000 RMB, equivalent to approximately 22,500 USD. Meanwhile, Li Kun's wife began berating him for the situation, and the once happy couple gradually edged toward divorce. Under this pressure, Li Kun became more withdrawn and silent. The psychological strain caused him to develop a disturbing habit of voyeurism. At Li Kun's home, police found various types of telescopes. Li Kun admitted that when he felt anxious, he would retreat to the bedroom and use the telescopes to spy on residents in the opposite building, observing which woman in which apartment was the most attractive. He hoped that through this strange voyeuristic behavior, he could relieve some of his stress. Over time, Li Kun discovered that the owner of apartment 401 across the way was Li Sha, who was usually home alone during the day. As a result, Li Kun made Li Sha the target of his daily voyeurism. Faced with the enormous debt and constant arguments with his wife, Li Kun once considered ending everything. However, fearing death, he couldn't bring himself to do it. So he came up with a very bold idea. Li Kun planned to murder Li Sha, knowing that once his crime was discovered, he would be sentenced to death, thereby escaping all his worldly troubles. On the morning of September 11, 2014, around 8:30 a.m., Li Kun saw through his telescope that Li Sha had returned home alone. Seizing the moment, he grabbed the weapon he had prepared and went to Li Sha's apartment. Li Kun posed as a building manager and tricked Li Sha into opening the door by claiming there was a gas leak that needed to be checked. Once Li Sha let her guard down, Li Kun pulled out a fruit knife, ready to carry out his plan of assault. During the struggle, Li Sha tried to fight back and ran into the southern bedroom. In the process, Li Kun's right thumb was cut. However, Li Sha was eventually overpowered after being stabbed multiple times, rendering her unable to move. Li Kun then proceeded with his plan. In one of the drawers in Li Sha's bedroom, Li Kun found a wallet. He pulled it out and was about to open it when, unexpectedly, Li Sha got up from the floor. In a panic, Li Kun threw the wallet back into the closet, then dragged Li Sha into the bathroom. Once again, the fruit knife was used. After finishing the act, Li Kun took Li Sha's cell phone and sent a strange message to her husband. His intention was to stage the scene as a robbery turned murder. However, in his confusion, Li Kun suddenly regretted his decision. He no longer wanted to face the death penalty, so he decided to destroy the evidence. He took 2 bottles of white liquor from Li Sha's house and set the southern bedroom on fire. He then used a pair of scissors to cut Li Sha's pants and poured the liquor on her before setting her body on fire. After that, Li Kun changed into a set of clothes he had prepared in advance and placed the cell phone, the 2 bottles of liquor, the fruit knife, and Li Sha's blood-stained clothes into a plastic bag. Before Li Sha's husband returned home, Li Kun calmly left the crime scene. After completing his confession, Li Kun was taken to the scene to point out key details of the crime. Meanwhile, the Changzhou police recovered the murder weapon and Li Sha's cell phone, which had been discarded in a canal outside the residential area. Upon reviewing the entire case, everyone was left in shock. The origin of this tragedy stemmed from an ordinary worker who fell into the trap of a scam gang. In reality, after accruing such a large, high-interest debt, Lee Kun could have resolved this issue legally. According to the law, lending at excessively high interest rates is illegal. Unfortunately, in his extreme despair, Lee Kun chose a deeply radical solution. He no longer wanted to live, but instead of ending his own life, he chose to take an innocent person with him. This truly leaves everyone feeling bitter and sorrowful. Finally, the Jiangsu Provincial High People's Court convicted Lee Kun of illegal trespassing, premeditated murder, and destruction of evidence. He was sentenced to death. This sentence provided some comfort to everyone involved. Our next case spans 21 years and took place at a roadside restaurant. The crime scene was located north of Baihei Town, Zhejiang Province, China. Around 7 a.m. on March 19, 1993, the owner of Tianbei Restaurant in Baihei Town opened the restaurant early to prepare for the new workday. However, the waitress who lived at the restaurant did not wake up on time, and there were no sounds coming from her bedroom. This unusual behavior gave the owner, Wan Lu, a sense of foreboding. To protect himself, he called on the neighboring shop owner, Mr. Guo, to help him push open the bedroom door. Inside the room, a red blanket appeared to cover someone lying on the bed. Although Mr. Wan was naturally timid, he summoned the courage to pull back the blanket. What they found was the waitress lying face down on the bed, her hands tied with a rope. Around her neck was a red floral cloth and a black 2-core electrical wire. Additionally, a wad of fabric was stuffed in her mouth, and her body showed no signs of life. The police were then called to the scene and quickly arrived. Based on the restaurant owner's statement, the victim was a 29-year-old waitress named Yang Jinfei from Xinchuan County in Zhejiang Province. She had only started working at Tianbei Restaurant recently. According to witnesses at the restaurant, Yang Jinfei was known for being diligent, responsible, and honest in her interactions. She had no conflicts or disputes with anyone. Her mysterious murder left the restaurant owners, Mr. and Mrs. Wan Lu, deeply shocked. The police investigators then entered Yang Jinfei's room to begin their crime scene investigation. Based on the circumstances of the attack, it appeared that Yang Jinfei had been subdued by someone and strangled to death. As a result, there were no clear signs of a struggle at the scene. However, one detail puzzled the investigators. In Yang Jinfei's bedroom, a drawer on the desk had been violently opened. From this, the investigators speculated that the attacker might have entered the house to steal valuables. However, the restaurant owner stated that there were no valuable items kept in the restaurant. Could it be that the perpetrator was searching for something specific? With this theory in mind, the investigators decided to collect fingerprints from all items in the drawer. As expected, the forensic team found a clear fingerprint on the edge of the drawer. After analysis, the police discovered that the fingerprint did not belong to the victim, Yang Jinfei. Moreover, the forensic team also found a few drops of fresh blood on an envelope in the drawer. This raised suspicions, as the police speculated that if Yang Jinfei had not struggled with her killer, the blood might have come from the perpetrator injuring themselves while opening the drawer. This meant the killer might have had an injury to their hand. After further testing, the police confirmed that the blood on the envelope did not belong to Yang Jinfei, as her blood type was O, while the blood found was type AB. Additionally, the investigators collected clear footprints on the ground, measuring size 7.5, size 40 in EU sizing. Forensic analysis confirmed that the prints came from a pair of Converse shoes. Based on the crime scene findings, the police created a preliminary profile of the suspect. The suspect was likely a male, wearing size 7.5 Converse shoes and standing between 5 feet 3 inches and 5 feet 7 inches tall. Recently, the suspect may have suffered a hand injury. His blood type was AB. Moreover, the suspect demonstrated considerable anti-investigation skills, suggesting he might have experience in theft or a previous criminal record. With these clues, the Baihei Town police began investigating the victim's social connections. At this point, a strange piece of news came from the hometown of the victim, Yang Jinfei. Her 8-year-old daughter, Zheng Yingying, had suddenly been kicked out of the house by her grandmother. The reason was that after Yang Jinfei gave birth to her daughter, her mother, Jung Mo, had always helped take care of her granddaughter, and the relationship between them had been very good. However, after Yang Jinfei's death, Jung Mo's behavior suddenly changed. She became unusually cold toward her granddaughter and ultimately decided to abandon Zheng Yingying, kicking her out of the house. This unusual event immediately raised suspicions for the police, who quickly went to question Jung Mo. To their surprise, the first thing Jung Mo said left the officers in shock. She claimed that the person who killed her daughter was none other than her son-in-law, Zheng Qinghui. But could solving the case be that easy? Of course, it wasn't that simple. According to Zheng Mo's testimony, when Yang Jinfei was alive, she had wanted to marry Zheng Qinghui, but Zheng Mo strongly opposed the marriage. Despite her protests, things progressed until Yang Jinfei gave birth to her daughter, and Zheng Mo had no choice but to accept the marriage. Over time, the situation seemed to calm down. Unfortunately, the family's happiness did not last long. After Yang Jinfei started working at Tianbei restaurant, Zheng Mo noticed that her son-in-law, Zheng Qinghui, began having conflicts with her daughter. Zheng Qinghui became suspicious that his wife was engaging in illicit activities at Tianbei restaurant, which made him furious and led him to kick his wife out. At this point, the police understood why Zheng Mo had severed ties with her granddaughter. The officers then persuaded Zheng Mo to take her granddaughter back and care for her. Although Zheng Mo's suspicions had not yet been proven, the police considered this a crucial lead that could not be overlooked. Based on the information provided by Zheng Mo, the investigators quickly located the victim's husband, 31-year-old Zheng Qinghui, who also lived in Sichuan County, Zhejiang Province. According to Zheng Qinghui's statement, on the day of the murder, he and several colleagues had been working together in Sichuan town and had not left the area. The police then questioned several of Zheng Qinghui's colleagues, who confirmed that he had not left work during the time the crime took place. However, to ensure accuracy, the police collected Zheng Qinghui's fingerprints and blood samples. After comparing and analyzing them, the police ruled out the possibility of Zheng Qinghui being the suspect in the case. Despite this, Zheng Qinghui's mother-in-law, Zheng Mo, remained adamant that her daughter, Yang Jinfei, had been murdered by Zheng Qinghui. With no clear explanation or lead on the actual killer, the police shifted their focus to other potential suspects in the area. However, no one anticipated that this decision would inadvertently overlook a crucial aspect of the case. On the second day after Yang Jinfei's murder, the Baihei Police Department formed a secret investigation team. They deployed more than 80 officers, concentrating their efforts in Baihei town and expanding into surrounding areas. Their primary focus was on local men between the ages of 20 and 40, with heights ranging from 5 feet 3 inches to 5 feet 7 inches. Special attention was given to individuals with a history of petty theft or a criminal record. The police were also instructed to investigate anyone who had recent injuries to their hands more thoroughly. After several days of investigation and groundwork, the police identified 141 local men who fit the age criteria. Following interviews, they eliminated 130 individuals as suspects, leaving about 10 with criminal backgrounds. Among them, 5 had previous theft offenses. The investigation team began to dig deeper into these individuals, focusing on one suspect named Wang Tianbao. In July 1990, Wang had been detained by the local police for 49 days after breaking into a house and stealing 700 yuan, about 100 USD. The police questioned Wang Tianbao. "Have you been to Baihei town recently?" Wang responded, "On February 26th, I visited the village of Maishan in the town center to stay with a friend named Zhang Xu. However, I returned home that same afternoon." Wang also stated that on the night of the murder, "I was playing cards with some friends at home and didn't leave the house all night." The police then collected Wang Tianbao's fingerprints and interviewed his card-playing friends, but found no suspicious signs. As for the remaining 4 suspects, the police systematically ruled them out except for the final suspect, Wang Jiafu, who mysteriously disappeared after the crime occurred. Even more suspicious was a report from one of Wang Jiafu's former elementary school classmates, who informed the police that he had seen Wang Jiafu with a bandaged injury on his hand. When asked about the cause of the injury, Wang Jiafu gave a stammering response, as if unwilling to reveal the real reason. These signs indicated a strong possibility that Wang Jiafu was involved in the case. However, at that time, the police were unable to track Wang Jiafu through a mobile phone, as such technology wasn't available. The only lead they had was that Wang Jiafu had previously worked as a laborer at an industrial park near Hangzhou. As a result, the investigation team sent 4 officers from Baihei to Hangzhou to continue their investigation. After 2 days of meticulous searching, the officers finally located Wang Jiafu at a factory. When found, Wang Jiafu was in a state of panic and even tried to flee. However, 2 officers had already set up an ambush near the factory entrance, leaving him with no way to escape. After a preliminary investigation, Wang Jiafu was arrested. As expected, he had a fresh injury on his hand. The investigation team then transported Wang Jiafu back to the Baihei Police Department, where forensic scientists collected his blood samples for testing. The results revealed that Wang Jiafu had blood type O, matching the blood found at the crime scene. However, when comparing fingerprints, the police discovered that Wang Jiafu's fingerprints did not match those collected from the crime scene. It's important to note that DNA testing was not yet advanced in China at the time. So, had the investigation team arrested the wrong person? At this point, the police considered the possibility that the crime might have been committed by a gang of thieves, and they began questioning Wang Jiafu about his whereabouts. His testimony surprised the entire police team. According to Wang Jiafu, on the night of March 18th, he had gone with 2 friends to a karaoke bar at a fancy club in the town's district. During their time there, he got into an argument with a group of young men from another area, which eventually escalated into a fight between the 2 groups. As a result, Wang Jiafu injured his right hand. The following day, fearing retaliation, Wang Jiafu hastily left Baihei town. When the police found him at a factory in Hangzhou, Wang thought he was being accused of the fight, which is why he attempted to flee. Later, the Baihei police questioned Wang Jiafu's 2 friends, and their statements confirmed that Wang Jiafu didn't have the time to commit the crime that night. This new detail caused the investigation to hit another dead end. In the Baihei town police office, the investigation team was exhausted. Over a month had passed since the crime, and rumors started spreading among the locals. Some people claimed that the Baihei Police Department was incapable of solving the case and that they would never catch the real culprit. Others speculated that the victim's husband, Zheng Qinghui, was actually the killer, unable to endure Yang Jinfei's betrayal, and had murdered her himself. At this point, the investigation team noticed a subtle but significant lead. After the crime, Yang Jinfei's mother, Zhang Mo, and several locals had mentioned that Yang might have been involved in illicit activities at Tianbei restaurant. Initially, the police didn't pay much attention to this claim, but now it seemed like the community had some basis in fact. During that time, roadside restaurants with hidden services were not uncommon. These establishments often provided additional entertainment to young men looking for such activities. The Tianbei restaurant, where the crime took place, was located right next to National Highway 104. As a result, the investigation team resumed questioning Wan Lu, the owner of Tianbei restaurant, who firmly denied that his restaurant offered any such services. After thorough investigations, the police confirmed that Tianbei restaurant was indeed operating legitimately. However, these rumors gave the investigation team a completely new direction. The police realized that their previous inquiries and investigations had focused primarily on local residents and truck drivers who had connections with Tianbei restaurant in the past. Although the restaurant didn't offer illegal services, powerful truck drivers frequently dined there in the past. The police did not rule out the possibility that waitress Yang Jinfei had a conflict with one of these drivers, leading to her murder. Therefore, the investigation team went back to Tianbei's owner, Wan Lu, for further questioning. They asked Wan Lu about the restaurant's last transaction on the day of the murder. Wan Lu thought carefully and responded that a large truck from Wenling carrying piglets had stopped by. There were a total of 3 people who came into the restaurant. However, it was nearly 10 p.m. and the restaurant had run out of food. The three men sat for a while before leaving. The police then went to other restaurants in the area to conduct further interviews. During questioning, the police discovered a particularly suspicious truck driver. Based on the description from a restaurant employee on the night of the crime, a young truck driver with a hand injury had come to eat but seemed to be in a hurry. As soon as he finished eating, he quickly got back into his truck and drove off. The truck was green, and the license plate appeared to have a 5 at the end. With these clues, the investigation team swiftly headed to Wenzhou City. Finally, with the help of the Vehicle Registration Authority, they identified the truck driver as Zhang Maihong. According to Zhang Maihong's statement, on the day of the crime, his truck had indeed passed through Baihe town. However, Zhang couldn't remember if he had stopped to eat at a restaurant since the driver that day was actually his hired assistant. Through Zhang Maihong, the police learned that the driver's name was Zheng Ming, a 23-year-old local from Wenzhou. He typically worked within the city, but occasionally took personal jobs and drove longer routes. This seemed unremarkable. However, according to Zhang's description, Zheng Ming returned from his delivery and suddenly said, "I have a family matter," before quickly leaving the job site. The investigation team did not want to overlook any possible lead. They coordinated with the Wenzhou City Police to locate Zheng Ming, whose home was in a small town on the outskirts of Wenzhou. When the investigators found Zheng Ming, he explained that the injury on his hand was from an accident while transporting goods. However, the suspicious part of his statement was that, while he admitted to passing through Baihe town on the day of the crime, he claimed he did not stop to eat there. This contradicted the information provided by the restaurant employee earlier. So, who was lying? The police couldn't make an immediate decision based on this alone. They needed to gather more evidence to determine the truth. However, after comparing and analyzing the evidence, they found that Zheng Ming's fingerprints and blood type did not match those found at the crime scene. While the police considered the possibility that a gang might have committed the crime, they didn't completely rule out Zheng Ming's involvement. Due to a lack of evidence, the Baihe police had no choice but to release Zheng Ming. Meanwhile, the investigation team issued a nationwide search alert through the national police system, hoping to gather some useful leads with the help of law enforcement across the country. However, even after years had passed since the alert was issued, no new clues were uncovered. As time went on, although the Baihe police never gave up, it became clear that finding the culprit among such a large population was becoming increasingly difficult. Then, in 1998, 5 years after the murder of Yang Jinfei, another strange homicide occurred in Baihe town, Tiantai County. On April 15, 1998, in the village of Daiqiao Baihe town, a grocery store owner was brutally killed during a robbery. The victim, 32-year-old Chen Meiqiu, was a local resident. On the night of the crime, she had been sleeping in the attic above the store. The next morning, when her husband opened the door, he found her lying motionless on the bed. After an initial investigation, the police discovered that this case bore striking similarities to the murder of Yang Jinfei 5 years earlier. First, both victims were women, and the perpetrator used the same method of suffocation to kill them. Second, at both crime scenes, the police found footprints from Converse sneakers, and the shoe sizes in both cases were very similar. Based on technical analysis, the police speculated that the suspect in the second case was between 20 and 25 years old. This age range matched the profile of the killer who took Yang Jinfei's life 5 years earlier. Third, both perpetrators in these cases had intended to break into the victims' homes and steal valuables. Additionally, they chose targets that were stores located in rural areas. Based on these similarities, the Baihe town police decided to investigate the two cases together. Unfortunately, in the second case, the police were unable to gather any useful physical evidence from the crime scene. The investigation team could only conduct a large-scale probe. Their primary focus was on villagers nearby, especially those with prior convictions for theft. After more than 6 months of investigation, the team interviewed over 4,000 people and compiled 12 volumes of survey notes. However, all initial suspects were ruled out. With changes in personnel and organizational restructuring within the police force, The murders of Yang Jinfei and Chen Meishu gradually became cold cases that no one could solve. At that time, one investigator, Wang Jianrong, strongly believed that the killer in both cases was likely the same person, a repeat offender who would strike again. As a result, whenever a crime occurred in the surrounding area, Wang Jianrong would bring along fingerprint records and visit the local police station to request a comparison and analysis of the suspect's fingerprints. But for over 20 years, no new leads emerged. Then, in late February 2014, by which time Wang Jianrong had been promoted to head of the criminal investigation team in Tiantai County, he received a sudden phone call from the Sanmen County Police. They informed Wang Jianrong that the fingerprints from the 1993 Yang Jinfei case had finally matched. Based on the fingerprint comparison, the police identified a suspect named Guo Guangquai. However, when they reviewed his household registration information, the Tiantai County Police found something very unusual. Guo Guangquai, born in 1975, was 39 years old at the time and from Jintang County, Chengdu City, Sichuan Province. Geographically, Jintang County is more than 1,200 miles from Baihei Town, Tiantai County, where the crime took place. In 1993, transportation was not as convenient as it is today. So why would Guo Guangquai travel such a long distance to commit the crime? The police were concerned that they might have the wrong person, so Wang Jianrong sent 3 officers to Jintang County, Sichuan Province, to conduct a field investigation. At the local police station, the investigation team learned that in August 1993, Guo Guangquai had been sentenced to 1 year and 6 months of labor re-education by the Chengdu Labor Education and Management Committee for theft. In August 1997, Guo Guangquai, showing no signs of reform, committed another theft with 2 accomplices. In January 1999, Guo Guangquai was given a 6-month suspended sentence by the Jintang County People's Court in Sichuan Province. These repeated theft offenses further increased suspicion of Guo Guangquai. However, according to his family, Guo had left his hometown over 6 months earlier and had been working in Shitang Town, Yongle City, Zhejiang Province. It was said that he had been working as a fisherman at sea. After receiving this information, the Tiantai County Police immediately went to Shitang Town, Yongle City. Using the registered information of fishermen, the police quickly identified the fishing boat where Guo Guangquai was employed. In the area, fishing boats typically stay at sea for extended periods, sometimes 2 to 3 months or even 6 months at a time before returning. As a result, the Tiantai Police had to use the fishing boat's GPS tracking system to closely monitor its activities. Finally, on the morning of March 31st, after about a month of surveillance, the boat returned to port. As soon as the fishing boat docked, the Tiantai Police boarded and conducted their investigation. When the suspect Guo Guangquai was still trying to understand what was happening, the police had already handcuffed him. On the first night of his arrest, Guo Guangquai was quickly taken to the police station for an overnight interrogation. Strangely, when faced with the police questioning, Guo Guangquai didn't offer any defense. He openly admitted to committing the crime in 1993. Even more surprising, Guo Guangquai revealed the identities of 2 accomplices. They were Zhang Xianwen, born in 1974, from Jintang County, Sichuan Province, and Xia Zhengsong, born in 1972, from Pengzhou City, Sichuan Province. Both accomplices were old friends of Guo Guangquai from Chengdu City. With this crucial information, the Tiantai Police quickly traveled to Chengdu. On April 1st, 2014, Zhang Xianwen was arrested while watching TV at home. Around the same time, Tiantai Police received a tip from the railway department about the 3rd suspect, Xia Zhengsong. He had purchased a train ticket to Haikou at Chengdu East Station. As a result, on April 2, 2014, Tiantai Police arrested Xia Zhengsong while he was waiting for the train and brought him back to headquarters. In the interrogation room, the 3 suspects recounted the crime they committed over 20 years ago. During the Chinese New Year in 1993, Zhang Xianwen in Chengdu, Sichuan Province, heard people talking about a great opportunity to make money by going fishing in Yongle, Zhejiang. So, After the new year, Zhang Xianwen, along with Guo Guangquai and Xia Zhengsong, left Chengdu. Since it was their first time traveling far from home, the three men encountered many difficulties getting from Sichuan to Yongle. They spent 10 days trying to find fishing jobs but were unsuccessful. At this point, they had run out of travel money. As a result, they stole 3 bicycles by the roadside and planned to ride along National Highway 104 to Hangzhou. Their plan at the time was to take a train back to their hometown in Sichuan once they reached Hangzhou. However, they hadn't realized that the mountainous roads along Highway 104 were difficult to navigate. After 2 days of continuous cycling, they finally reached Tiantai County. On the night of March 19th, 1993, the night of the crime around 1 a.m., the 3 men from Sichuan arrived in Baihei town, located along the highway. They spotted a restaurant by the road, and since they were hungry, Guo Guangquai suggested breaking into the restaurant to get food. Guo Guangquai and Zhang Xianwen quietly climbed through the restaurant window. At the time, Tianbei restaurant had a total of 3 rooms, with the last room being the bedroom of the waitress, Yang Jinfei. After the 3 men entered the restaurant, they realized no one was there, so they started rummaging through the refrigerator for food. However, Yang Jinfei, who had been sleeping soundly, woke up and was quickly tied up by Guo Guangquai and the others using a rope. Guo Guangquai even found a pair of socks to gag her. They continued searching for valuables, but not long after, Yang Jinfei managed to free herself from the gag. When she started screaming, Guo Guangquai panicked, grabbed the socks again, and gagged her once more. He then took a red cloth to further tie her up. Attacking from behind, Guo Guangquai forcefully strangled Yang Jinfei. Despite being a weak woman, Yang Jinfei struggled desperately for her life. At this point, Guo Guangquai picked up a black 2-core electrical wire and wrapped it around her neck 4 times. Eventually, the unfortunate woman suffocated to death. After the murder, Guo Guangquai felt a pang of guilt. He used a knife to pry open the drawer in Yang Jinfei's bedroom and accidentally cut his right thumb, causing several drops of fresh blood to fall onto an envelope inside the drawer. Once finished, Guo Guangquai and the other 2 men wiped away their fingerprints and hurriedly fled the scene. Due to the limited forensic technology at the time, the Tiantai County Police couldn't have imagined that the perpetrators came from such a distant location. When Yang Jinfei's family heard the news that the criminals had been caught, they were overcome with emotion. It was as if a light had finally pierced the darkness that had lasted for 21 years. Meanwhile, Yang Jinfei's daughter, Zheng Yingying, who had now grown into an adult, was heartbroken over the injustices her family had endured for so many years. Initially, everyone believed that justice would finally be served. However, no one could have predicted that, after the truth was revealed, the Tiantai County Police would face an unprecedented situation, one that could potentially allow the 3 perpetrators to escape legal punishment. The crime against Yang Jinfei occurred in 1993, and according to the legal principles for serious crimes, the trial of Guo Guangquai, Zhang Xianwen, and Xia Zhengsong had to follow the provisions of the First Criminal Code of China, which was enacted in 1979. However, according to Article 76 of that criminal code, the maximum penalties under the law, life imprisonment or the death penalty, cannot be pursued if more than 20 years have passed since the crime was committed. This means that the murder of Yang Jinfei, having occurred 21 years ago, has exceeded the statute of limitations for prosecution. During those 21 years, both Zhang Xianwen and Xia Zhengsong had no further criminal records. As a result, under the criminal law, Zhang Xianwen and Xia Zhengsong would not face any legal responsibility. As for Guo Guangquai, because he had committed a crime in August 1997, within the statute of limitations, he would be held legally responsible under criminal law. It was shocking to learn that 2 of the 3 perpetrators could avoid punishment. Upon hearing this, Yang Jinfei's family was devastated. They argued that if someone could commit an intentional attack and escape legal responsibility, what was the purpose of the law in the world? Faced with this situation, the Tiantai County Police Department held a thorough discussion and decided to proceed. They would continue their investigation and evidence collection according to standard procedure, and then hand the case over to the prosecution for trial. In mid-April 2014, the Tiantai County People's Procuratorate issued a decision to prosecute all three suspects, Guo Guangquai, Zhang Xianwen, and Xia Zhengsong. The Procuratorate gave two reasons. First, it would be unfair if only Guo Guangquai, who was within the statute of limitations, faced legal consequences while Zhang Xianwen and Xia Zhengsong did not. Second, in the case of Yang Jinfei, the three individuals had committed an extremely brutal crime, causing significant harm to society. Failing to prosecute such a case would make it difficult for the rule of law to maintain the trust of the public. Therefore, the Tiantai County People's Procuratorate followed legal procedures and escalated the case step by step to the Supreme People's Procuratorate. Finally, in October 2014, the Supreme People's Procuratorate approved the decision to reopen the prosecution. In the trial, Guo Guangquai, the main perpetrator, was sentenced to death for intentional homicide and theft. The other two defendants, Zhang Xianwen and Xia Zhengsong, were sentenced to life imprisonment for similar charges. This verdict brought a sense of relief to Yang Jinfei's family and was strongly supported by the public. As you can see, the investigation and trial process for this case spanned 21 years. However, justice and the law were ultimately upheld. Additionally, this case connects to another crime, the murder of grocery store owner Chen Meishu, which we will cover in a future video. That concludes today's 3 stories from Crime Documentary Files. What are your thoughts on these cases? Please share your opinions in the comments below.